All righty. Clock on the front says it is about that time. And we will get ready to get started. I don't know about everybody else, but I am summered out. After this week, I am bring on fall. I think yesterday may have been about the hottest day we've had all summer, and it was not fun being outside. Day's going to be just like yesterday. So I'm ready for cooler something to get here. By the way, how was the weather out in Hawaii for 30 days? Huh? Very good weather. It wasn't like this, was it? I saw today that there was snow in Hawaii on the mountains. The hurricane that's out in that area was producing snow and blizzard-like conditions on top of one of the Hawaiian mountains. Yeah. It's just hard to imagine snow in Hawaii and even on the mountain. But prayer list. Let's see, I saw a couple here. Callie Jane Kington had a tonsillectomy. Tommy Turner is continuing his recovery. He was here Wednesday night and he was moving mighty slow. I watched him sit down one time and it was like took a little while to get down. Of course, they have cut him front and back and he has had a lot. So. Yeah, flooding. There's been the Indianapolis area was having a lot of flooding today. Of course, this past week, parts of Kentucky Central and East Central have had some flooding there. I know they had flooding one day and we didn't have a drop. And we were 98 degrees and 105 heat index. So a lot of people dealing with that. Anybody else? School goes back this week here. I think everybody else is already back, but UHA goes back this week and Christian County goes this week. And pray for everybody going back and all the drivers on the south side of town because nobody knows what that's going to be like that first couple of days. Huh? It's chaos. Well, okay, I was trying to be nice. There's going to be chaos for a day or two out there until everybody figures out what they get going. But is school back in session? Anybody else would need to? I'm trying to think if I've heard of anybody or. Everybody quiet. Air conditioner running, thank goodness. If you've ever walked in this building when the air is not working in here, it doesn't take long for this room to get pretty toasty. So. All right, if not, Pete, would you start us this morning?
We know that there are people suffering from natural disasters. We not only pray for them, but we also pray that we can do things for them physically that help them through these times of trial. We're thankful this morning for each and every soul represented here. As always, we pray for God that things that He has prepared for these things and apply to our daily walk of life. All these blessings we ask.
All right, we are continuing on with our look at the book of Exodus. And one note, Freddie is going to sub in for me next Sunday morning. Stacy's taking me out of town for a little day off or two. for my birthday this week. It's one of those. It used to be a milestone birthday, but it's not quite as much anymore because 65 used to be your full age Social Security. And since it's not anymore, it's just really one of those other numbers. So we're going to do a little getaway for a couple of days. So Freddie has graciously said he would take class. So, all right, we're rolling on, and where we left off was the nation of Israel had left Egypt. They had gotten out to the Red Sea, and now they are trapped. They get out there, there's water on one side, and what's coming on the backside? A big army. At the time, the army in the world at that time. And we talked about, and we had a picture last week of one of the chariots. There's 600 elite chariots, and then no telling how many of the other chariots. Their elite chariots were the one that held two people, one guy driving and one guy shooting. And they were built to go fast, to attack. And it would have been an impressive sight. We talk about the horses had the head dressing, and that they would have been able to see this coming. And it would have been a sight that would have let you going, uh-oh, this is not good. And then on the other side is the Red Sea. And so now they find themselves in a situation. They've gotten out of Egypt, they've gotten out of slavery, but now they're trapped. So the people blame Moses about this. Of course, they're going to do this a lot as we go on. They're going to lay a lot of blame at Moses all the time. But they blame Moses, and they leave a three-pronged complaint. One is that Moses has been reckless. He brought them out there in the wilderness to die. They were in trouble in Egypt. They had a hard life in Egypt. But now Moses has made it all worse for them because you brought us out here, and now they're coming, and they're either going to capture us again or they're going to do worse. They're just going to kill us out here in the desert, in the wilderness. Now remember, what did the people say after Moses' first visit to Pharaoh? And Pharaoh says, well, now they can make it without us giving the straw. And they lay blame on Moses for making things hard on them there, that they have to go get their own straw now. So this is not an unusual thing that they blame Moses for their situation. So now they've said, Moses, you've been reckless. You brought us out here, and we're going to die out here on the shore of the Red Sea. They also tell Moses, we told you it wouldn't work. Why didn't you just leave us alone when we asked you? You know, we may have been in slavery, but we had houses, we had food, and now you brought us out here, we're going to die. Why didn't you just leave us alone? Why didn't you just leave us alone? And three, we were better off in Egypt. It was hard work, but at least we weren't lost in the wilderness with the army poised to attack us. You know, they were working us and slave driving us, and we were building all the buildings in Egypt for them and all that, but they weren't ready to kill us. So they're all out here and, you know, blaming Moses for what they think is about to happen. The only thing is, they didn't know. They didn't have faith enough to know. You know, they'd just gone through all of the plagues. They had seen what God had done to the people of Egypt. You know, the last, 7 plagues did not affect the people of Israel. They affected the Egyptians. To the point, the 10th plague, Pharaoh just tells them to get out. They've seen all this go on, but yet they don't have faith that God can get them out of the situation they're in now. Do we still have that problem sometimes today, that we've had God bring us through a lot? And we've been through all this, and at some point we look at God and say, but this is different. I think man has not changed over the thousands of years. No matter, I think we still have the issue today of God's done a lot for us, provided a lot for us, but there are times we look at it and go, oh, this ain't happening this time. But here, as we see them pinned up against the Red Sea, it's time for God to really level the final blow against Pharaoh. So let's look at Exodus 14, verses 13 and 14. Exodus 14, verses 13 and 14. But Moses said to the people, "Don't be afraid, stand firm and see the Lord's salvation that he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you must be quiet." So they're all out there complaining, they're all out there whining and groaning and moaning, and what does Moses say? If we want to use a little slang verbiage today, Moses is politely telling them, shut up and watch. That's essentially what he's telling them here, isn't it? Just be quiet and watch. Moses believes the Lord and he encourages the people. Now the people are all standing there pointing, but look what's coming. And they would have been able to see them coming from a ways off. So they're sitting there seeing all this coming, and Moses says, I know it's coming, but just wait, hold on. Because is God's timetable always our timetable? No. You look at the walls of Jericho. Could God have brought those walls down the first day? He could have. It took 7 days. Naaman the leper dipped into the water how many times? Could God have healed him the first time he went down into the water? Yeah. But that wasn't in his timing or in his plan. So Moses is saying, hold on here, just stand firm. Moses seems to think that God will simply wipe them out using the angel of death or something. Moses really has no, at this point, clue what's about to happen. He just knows that God will take care of them. God's told him, I'm going to take care of this. So Moses is probably envisioning the angel of death coming out again and just wiping them out, this time everybody. But Moses has faith that something's going to happen. Now let's go on to verse 15. Beginning of verse 15. The Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to break camp. As for you, lift up your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide it so the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. As for me, I'm going to harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them, and I will receive glory by means of Pharaoh, all his army, and his chariots and horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I receive glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. So he tells Moses, what you're going to do is you're going to go out and you're going to hold your hand out over the sea. What do you think Moses' first thought is? We're going to do what? And if I go out and hold my hand over the sea, what's going to happen? Are you going to bring up a big slab of rock that we can go across? What's going to happen? God's plan for a rescue is quite different. It's quite demonstrative. It's going to be one of those things that shows God's power. But it's quite different. God's plan provided a dramatic divine rescue. It was not of themselves, but God who acted as a miraculous way to save them. This is going to leave no doubt in anybody's mind, either the Egyptians or the children of Israel, that this was God who took care of this. There's nothing about it that's going to lead them thinking they had anything to do with it. This is a big miracle display that's about to happen. God's plan was the final proof to the Egyptian people as well as to other nations that the God of the Israelites was greater than and more powerful than any of the gods of Egypt. Than any of the gods of Egypt. And remember, Pharaoh viewed himself as what? A god. Now, it's not scriptural, it's not in Scripture, but how many of you remember late in the movie of the Ten Commandments, after the Red Sea has collapsed on the Egyptian army, what does Pharaoh go back and say to his queen? I tried to get the clip and put it in here, but I couldn't get the clip to copy. The line that Yul Brynner gives, and you can see Pharaoh actually saying this, as he goes back after this is gone, his army has been wiped out, he sits down beside his queen and he says, and their God is God. This was a scene, this was an incident that was going to leave no doubt that God is God. And God tells Moses, I'm not going to leave any doubt this time. There's this is going to display to the Egyptian people and to other nations when they hear about this, there is going to be no doubt that there is no God but God. The God is more powerful than all. Now, let's go on at verse 19 and let's go through verse 31. Verse 19 to verse 31 says, then the angel of God who was going in front of the Israelite forces moved and went behind them. The pillar of cloud moved from in front of them and it stood behind them. It came between the Egyptian and the Israelite forces. There was cloud and darkness. It lit up the night, and neither group came near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord drove the sea back with a powerful east wind all that night and turned the sea into dry land, so that the waters were divided. And the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with the waters like a wall to them on their right and the left. The Egyptians set out in pursuit, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen, and went into the sea after them. During the morning watch, the Lord looked down at the Egyptian forces from the pillar of fire and cloud and threw the Egyptian forces into confusion. He caused their chariot wheels to swerve and made them drive with difficulty. Let's get away from Israel, the Egyptians said, because the Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea so that the water may come back on the Egyptians, on their chariots and horsemen. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea returned to its normal depth. While the Egyptians were trying to escape from it, the Lord threw them back into the sea. The water came back and covered the chariots and the horsemen, plus the entire army of Pharaoh that had gone after them into the sea. Not even one of them survived. But the Israelites had walked through the sea on dry ground with the waters like a wall to them on their right and their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the power of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. When Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and believed in him and in his servant Moses. And most of us, when we visualize this, we go back to that scene, what we saw in the Ten Commandments, all of that. I have seen some people argue that when the Red Sea parted, it was really just a lowering of the level here, and they were able to go. But the Bible here tells us what? That it split, and the sea was like what? On both sides. It was not just knee level. It said it was like a what? Wall to them on both sides. To me, that means when the sea parted, the water's like up at least overhead tall to make it feel like a wall. Bible says not once, but twice, the Red Sea was like a wall to them. To me, that means they can look to the side and go, man, this is scary. But they walked through, it says they walked through on dry ground. So a powerful thing happens here that leaves no doubt. Now, I've got a question for you. It goes through the story and tells all of this about it and how the Red Sea comes back down and collapses and the army's wiped out. Question. This is one of those archaeological, just historical discussions. Did Pharaoh die? Did Pharaoh die? What do you think? Did he die? Well, that's from a movie, though. That's Hollywood. That's Hollywood. But did Pharaoh die? And there are people, theological people on both sides of this issue as to whether or not Pharaoh died. So let's look a little bit about this. Commentators generally fall into two camps. One, of course, is the view that Pharaoh did die during this incident. Psalm 136:15, the most explicit passage in the Bible, states that God overthrew or shook off Pharaoh and his army in the Red Sea. Proponents of this view argue that the poetic books like the Psalms reflect the historical reality, directly placing Pharaoh himself in the sea during the collapse. Now, generally in military situations, on occasion you'll get the commanding general in front, but generally where is the commanding general? He's usually in the back or he's off to the side in a vantage point where he can watch. If you look at a lot of American Civil War stuff, and I've been watching a lot of American Civil War documentaries lately, Netflix has one about Grant, and they're always off from the battle, watching the battle until they're needed in it. But proponents here say that verse in Psalms indicates that Pharaoh was in the water. The total destruction phrasing in Exodus 14:28, the text notes that the waters covered the chariots and horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had gone into the sea after them. Not one of them remained. Now, one little thing about this argument is Pharaoh necessarily included in the army of Pharaoh? My thought is he's not necessarily included. It's his army, but he may not be the one who's in it. But there are many who use Exodus 14:28 to say Pharaoh died. Now, there's also, of course, the view that Pharaoh did not die when the Red Sea came back down. Many conservative scholars and historians argue that Pharaoh led his army to the shoreline, but he stayed back on land while sending his elite troops into the dried seabed. So Pharaoh's led them to the Red Sea. He sees the dry sea. He says, go. And he would have found him a vantage point to watch what he was going to think, what he thought was going to be a great victory. The specific wording in Exodus, and here's where they use the same verse to look for a different perspective. The narrative in Exodus 14:28 explicitly highlights the chariots and the horsemen, Pharaoh's entire army, but drops any direct mention of Pharaoh dying personally. Does not mention that Pharaoh died. And then you look at the Song of Moses, which we're getting to here in a little bit, Exodus 15. Immediately following the victory, Moses and the Israelites sing a victory song celebrating the downfall of their enemies. They specifically celebrate that Pharaoh's chariots and his army he has hurled into the sea. The best of Pharaoh's officers are drowned. Who does it not mention, though? Who does it not mention in that song? Now, we've just come through a stretch in history here where Pharaoh is a primary character. He is a central character in everything that's going on. Many people here make the argument that if Pharaoh had died, they would have been so excited that he was gone and he had been so much an oppressor on them that they would have specifically mentioned that Pharaoh was gone too. But in that song there, they mention the chariots and his army and the best of his officers, but they don't say Pharaoh died. Scholars note that if the supreme monarch of Egypt had died, ancient Hebrew tradition would have explicitly celebrated the death of the king rather than focusing solely on his officers and his army. They would have celebrated, Pharaoh's gone, our great oppressor is gone. But they celebrate the army being wiped out, but no mention of Pharaoh. Literary figures of speech in Hebrew saying God overthrew Pharaoh, as in Psalm 136, is often a synecdoche, a figure of speech where a leader personifies his entire nation or army. Destroying Pharaoh's military power is idiomatically described as overthrowing Pharaoh. If you beat his army, you've beat Pharaoh. Even though if his army's wiped out, he wasn't necessarily wiped out. You beat him by taking care of his army. So what archaeology and history say? We've looked at what biblical scholars and theologians say. Let's look a little bit at the archaeology and history say about the situation. If we look to historical records, the answer depends heavily on which Pharaoh you identify with the Exodus. If you look at archaeological and historical records, people generally have 3 pharaohs that they place as possible candidates to have been the Pharaoh at the time of Moses. This is Amenhotep. If you've ever watched the movie The Mummy, this is the name you've heard. Amenhotep II, that is actually his mummy, early date of 1446 BCE. There are biblical scholars who align the Exodus with Amenhotep II. Egyptian records and his physical mummy show he ruled for over 2 decades after this date and died in his late 40s, early 50s. So if he died 2 decades after this date, he didn't die in the Red Sea. Ramesses. If in the movie The 10 Commandments, Ramesses is who they lay out as Pharaoh. There you have the mummy, and there you have computer generations of what they believe based on the mummy Ramesses looked like. Ramesses lived 1250, 1210 BCE. And then Merneptah, son of Ramesses, somewhere late date of 1250, 1210 BCE. The mummies for both of those late date candidates have been recovered in the Valley of the Kings. Ramses II died as an old man in his 90s, and medical examinations of Merneptah showed that he died of severe arthritis and old age, not drowning. Which means historically and archaeologically, the indications are that Pharaoh did not die. His army died in the Red Sea, but he did not. So, ultimately, it really doesn't matter because God got them free from Egypt and did a demonstration that he was more powerful than Pharaoh, that he was God of all, he was the most powerful. And so whether Pharaoh lived or died becomes really irrelevant, doesn't it? And this is, if you look at what has happened to Egypt here over the last few chapters, firstborn dies, not just firstborn, but the firstborn of the livestock. And then the best of the best in the army has been wiped out. What kind of position does this leave Egypt in at this point? Stepping aside from the theological aspect of this, from a political, military standpoint, and from perception of the rest of the world, where does this leave Egypt at this point? Wiped out, pretty much. I mean, you lose that many people, you lose that many livestock, you lose that much of your army, you're irrelevant at this point. Although Egypt does survive a bit longer, this is the end of their power. All right, we'll go to Exodus chapter 15. The Song of Moses, Israel, and Miriam. Exodus 15, let's look at verses 1 through 21. So the Red Sea is collapsed in. The army of Pharaoh is now gone. So at verse 1 of chapter 15, then Moses and the Israelites sang this song to the Lord. They said, I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. He has thrown the horse and its rider into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him. My father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a warrior. The Lord is his name. He threw Pharaoh's chariots and his army into the sea. The elite of his officers were drowned in the Red Sea. The floods covered them. They sank to the depths like a stone. Lord, your right hand is glorious in power. Lord, your right hand shattered the enemy. You overthrew your adversaries. By your great majesty, you unleashed your burning wrath. It consumed them like stubble. The water heaped up at the blast from your nostrils. The current stood firm like a dam. The watery depths congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My desire will be gratified at their expense. I will draw my sword, my hand will destroy them. But you blew with your breath, and the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Lord, who is like you among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, revered with praises, performing wonders? You stretched out your right hand, and the earth swallowed them. With your faithful love, you will lead the people. You have redeemed, you will guide them to your holy dwelling with your strength. When the peoples hear, they will shudder. Anguish will seize the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom will be terrified. Trembling will seize the leaders of Moab. All the inhabitants of Canaan will panic. Terror and dread will fall on them. They will be as still as a stone because of your powerful arm, until your people pass by, Lord, until the people whom you purchased pass by. You will bring them in and plant them on the mountain of your possession. Lord, you have prepared for the place for your dwelling, Lord. Your hands have established the sanctuary. The Lord will reign forever and ever. When Pharaoh's horses with his chariots and horsemen went into the sea, the Lord brought the water of the sea back over them, but the Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground. Then the prophetess Miriam, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women came out following her with tambourines and dancing. Miriam sang to them, sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. He has thrown the horse and its rider into the sea. Big celebration, isn't it? Big celebration, honoring God, praising God. Hey, our God is powerful, wonderful. He's carried us through this. He's led us through this. And how long does this last? You know, you read this poem here and you hear this song and you think, hey, this is going to go well. They're celebrating. They know what God can do, and they know that God's all powerful, and they know that all about this and all about God. And how long does it take them to just forget? He said, 3 days. 3 days. That's one of the things when I've always looked at Exodus, I've always wondered, how can they forget? They're there. They witnessed this. How do you forget and turn your back? We have this. We have all that's in this. How often do we forget and turn our back? Tell you, man has not changed over thousands of years. And while we don't see it, we read it, but I still wonder about how do the Israelites, after what they just saw, they went through the Red Sea with the sea like a wall on each side of them. They go through on dry ground. They come out on the other side. When the Egyptians try to make the same thing happen, God wipes them out. And it takes them, as Judy said, 3 days. Man has the memory of a gnat. Or sometimes we have the faith of a gnat. God has gotten them through this, and suddenly when they get a little thirsty, they're thinking, well, God can't we're going to die out here. God surely can't get us water. Really? After what he did at the Red Sea, you're thinking God can't make water, or God can't make us food? You know, known in this song of Moses, Israel, and Miriam, known in the Jewish liturgy as Shirat Hayam, meaning the Song of the Sea, was included in early morning Jewish synagogue services. Scholars believe it may be, quote, the oldest piece of sustained poetry in the Hebrew Bible. The oldest piece of poetry. That's according to N.M. Sarna's book, Exodus, the JPS Torah commentary. But they believe that poem there is the oldest poetry. It's a song of praise to God for who He is and what He's done, repeating various works and characteristics over and over. You know, throw the horse into the sea. We go through on dry land. Pharaoh drowns. Praise God. Honor God. And like Judy said, that goes away in 3 days. It also emphasizes the results of what He has done for Israel, brought to holy habitation and other nations. Can you imagine being another nation and hearing this? You have a friend in Egypt and you get word that this is what happened to the Egyptian army? Are you going to want to mess with these people? It's like, nope, you go ahead, you go on through, we'll let you walk on by. It concludes with a summary statement and a joyful response from Miriam, Moses' sister, and the women who are singing this song. This is a celebration. This is a praise and a celebration of what has just taken place. The people are free, they're safe, they're ready to begin their journey to the promised land. But Judy said 3 days. However, this moment of rejoicing was not long-lived, as the people were now faced with a trek in the wilderness to reach the land promised to them by God through Moses. Got to go through the wilderness. What? One, there's not going to be a lot of food in the wilderness, is there? Two, there's not going to be a lot of water out in the wilderness, is there? So now we go into the journey. Exodus 15:20 through 18:27 is all about the journey and the journey to Sinai. And let's look at Exodus 15, beginning at verse 22. Exodus 15, beginning at verse 22. Then Moses led Israel on from the Red Sea, and they went out to the wilderness of Shur. They journeyed for 3 days in the wilderness without finding water. They came to Marah, but they could not drink the water at Marah because it was bitter. That is why it was named Marah. The people grumbled to Moses, "What are we going to drink?" So he cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree. When he threw it into the water became drinkable. The Lord made a statute and ordinance for them at Marah, and He tested them there. He said, "If you will carefully obey the Lord your God, do what is right in His sight, pay attention to His commands, and keep all His statutes, I will not inflict any illnesses on you that I inflicted on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs and 70 date palms, and they camped there by the water. So as Judy said, they're out 3 days. Hadn't had a lot of luck finding water. And then when they find water, what? Bad water. Can't taste. Can't drink it. But the Lord provides water. We now witness the beginning of God's dealing with the people. You look at some of this stuff during the journey through the wilderness, and you wonder how God just didn't say, "Enough of this. Just let them go." Of course, you also wonder sometimes today how God doesn't look at us and say, "Enough of this." They have traveled 3 days to a place where there should be water, but they find that the water is bitter. Marah equal bitter equals salty. So they get water, but they can't drink it. And now we see a familiar pattern begin here. As we see the story about the water, we see a pattern begin. One, the people immediately grumble and complain and direct their frustrations toward who? Toward Moses, demanding that he find a solution. "Moses, you got us out here. You got to find us water." Well, Moses does not defend himself or argue back with the people. He immediately goes what? Goes out to God and says, "Help!" Something the people should have done, should they not? They go to Moses, and Moses ends up being the one to go to God. And then the people overestimated Moses' power and authority. Their faith should have been in God, not in Moses. They don't even tell Moses, "Go ask God for us if He'll fix this." They say, "Moses, you got to fix this." But Moses can't fix it, can he? Moses actually goes to the source that the people should have gone to themselves. So they get water. Let's go on to chapter 16 real quick. Through verse 21. They're getting hungry now. The entire Israelite community departed from Elim and came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had left the land of Egypt. The entire Israel community grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by pots of meat and ate all the bread we wanted. Instead, you brought us into this wilderness to make us die of hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I'm going to rain bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. This way I will test them to see whether or not they'll follow my instructions. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather on other days." So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "This evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and in the morning you will see the Lord's glory, because he has heard your complaints about him. For who are we that you complain about us?" Moses continued, "The Lord will give you meat to eat this evening, and all the bread you want in the morning, for he has heard the complaints that you are raising against him. Who are we? Your complaints are not against us, but against the Lord." But then Moses told Aaron, "Say to the entire Israelite community, 'Come before the Lord, for he has heard your complaints.'" As Aaron was speaking to the entire Israelite community, they turned toward the wilderness, and there in a cloud the Lord's glory appeared. The Lord spoke to Moses, "I have heard the complaints of the Israelites. Tell them at twilight you will eat meat, in the morning you will eat bread until you are full. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." So at evening quail came and covered the camp. In the morning there was a layer of dew all around the camp. When the layer of dew evaporated, there were fine flakes on the desert surface, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they asked one another, "What is it?" because they didn't know what it was. Moses told them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather as much of it as each person needs to eat. You may take 2 quarts per individual, according to the number of people each of you has in his tent." So the Israelites did this. Some gathered a lot, some a little. When they measured it by quarts, the person who gathered a lot had no surplus, and the person who gathered a little had no shortage. Each gathered as much as he needed to eat. Moses said to them, "No one is to let any of it remain until morning." But they didn't listen to Moses. Some people left part of it until morning, and then it bred worms and stank. Therefore Moses was angry with them. They gathered it every morning. Each gathered as much as he needed to eat. But when the sun grew hot, it melted. Quail and manna. Bring you quail in the evening and manna in the morning. So they complain about water, they get water, they complain about food, and they get food. And here we see they left Egypt in a hurry. Remember, they left, packed up, and gone. So they didn't get any provisions for a long journey. They've been traveling about a month, and now they're running low on supplies. They're running out of stuff to eat. The pattern of complaining begins again, but this time suggesting that Moses somehow brought them out to starve them to death. It's always Moses' fault. Always Moses' fault. You brought us out here, we're going hungry, and it's your fault. And then God again responds by summarizing what he will do and why. He's going to provide daily food in an area where there's very little, and he's going to test the people to see if they'll be obedient to him. He puts little stipulations here. And right out of the way, what happens? Right out of the gate, what happens? They don't follow directions. Right out of the gate, they don't follow directions. And we'll see that pattern over and over and over again. They complain, God provides, God stipulates, and they don't follow. And it will ultimately it will lead to them wandering in the wilderness for how long? If they will stay in the wilderness a while, because they can't follow directions. Do we still have that problem today, that we can't follow directions? And the clock says we are out of time. Freddie will pick up there next week.